Did you know 2 years prior to the assassination of President Lincoln, his only surviving son Robert's life was saved by John Wilkes Booth's brother Edwin? It's true. And if you enjoyed this little fact, stick around because we have so much more on Now You Know. Did you know blackouts were used after the bombing of Pearl Harbor to cover and prevent a densely populated area from being seen from the sky? The New York Times actually started printing the crossword puzzle in the paper to give people something to do during those blackouts. Now you know. Did you know before Jimmy Carter was elected president, he was witness to a UFO sighting? Because of that moment, he swore that if he was ever elected president, he would do what he could to disclose all information related to them. Well, it is rumored that once he became president, he was briefed on UFOs, and then he was spotted in the Oval Office sobbing into his hands. After that, he didn't talk much about the subject. What do you think they told him back in 1977? I would love to hear your thoughts on this one. Why do we throw salt over our shoulder if it's spilled? Well, it's believed that the devil is standing there, and if you spill the salt, you're inviting him in. But if you throw it over your shoulder, it actually goes right into his eye, blinding him. But here's an interesting fact. If you look closely at Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, you see that Judas spilled the salt, and most people know that he betrayed Jesus. So some believe that this superstition actually started right here. The U.S. military's broken arrow is a code phrase used when there is an accidental event that involves nuclear weapons or their components. An example of this is in 1961 when a B-52 bomber carrying two 3.8 megaton Mark 39 nukes broke up midair and crashed near Goldsboro, North Carolina. One of the bombs broke up midair, but the other bomb's parachute failed and plunged into a muddy field. Only one of the 6 safety devices on the bomb remained intact, preventing detonation. But just so you know, there have been 32 broken arrow incidents since 1950. What the heck is that? Well, let me tell you. In 1910, Chester McDuffie created a submarine armor suit. It was designed to go to a depth of up to 212 feet deep, and it came equipped with 2 working robotic arms. It was made from aluminum and weighed a total of 480 pounds. The suit was not completely waterproof, but it did have a built-in pump that would keep the water in the suit below your knees. Would you trust this contraption? Now that we know what it is, I just have one more question. What were these used for? Why do we carve pumpkins? Well, once was a man named Stingy Jack. Jack was a two-faced, deceitful schemer who liked to manipulate people. So Satan sent a devil to bring Jack to hell, but Jack asked the devil for one more drink before leaving. The devil turned himself into a coin so Jack could buy a drink, but Stingy Jack put the coin in his pocket next to a cross, trapping the devil. Then Jack made a deal with the devil that if he left him alone for 10 years, he would set him free, and the devil agreed. 10 years later, the devil came to collect. But this time Jack asked the devil for an apple. So the devil climbed an apple tree, and Jack swiftly carved crosses to the base of the tree, trapping the devil once more. Jack told the devil that he would set him free only if the devil promised never to take him to hell. The devil agreed. Many years later, death came for Jack. When death delivered Jack to heaven, he was turned away for the dastardly deeds that he had committed. So death took Jack to hell, but the devil kept his promise, and Jack was sent back to wander the earth forever, trapped between heaven and hell. But before he was sent into the darkness, Satan gave Jack a burning amber, so he had a little light to see by. Jack carved out a turnip to keep the amber safe, and from then on, people used jack-o'-lanterns to ward off evil spirits like Stingy Jack. Now you know, like and subscribe. Light a candle, stand in front of the mirror, and call Bloody Mary 13 times, and a ghostly figure will appear. Where did this legend come from? Originally, a woman was to light a candle, walk up the stairs backwards, and then look into the mirror, and supposedly an image of her future husband would appear. If a skull appeared, it meant that she would die before she was able to be married. Over the years, this practice twisted and changed into the legend of Bloody Mary, whom some people say is based off of Queen Mary I, who burned 280 Protestants alive at the stake. Others say Mary was Elizabeth Bathory, a noblewoman who killed 650 of her servants so she'd be able to bath in their blood in an attempt to remain youthful. President Lincoln had 4 children: Robert, who was the only one to live to old age; Edward, who died at 3 years old from tuberculosis; William, who died at the age of 8 from typhoid fever; and Thomas, who died at the age of 18 from tuberculosis. After the death of William, the First Lady Mary started to have seances held in the Red Room of the White House. This was in hopes of communicating with William. Unfortunately, there is no record of what happened during the seances, other than the fact that there was 8 of them, and President Lincoln himself also participated. Now you know. This interesting fact was submitted by The Rain. Did you know that living rooms were once referred to as the death room? Why? Well, that is because when a loved one passed away, the viewing took place in the front room of the home. Thankfully, in 1910, Ladies' Home Journal suggested changing the name to the living room. This would reflect a more positive and cheerful use of the space. Did you know Ronald Reagan, the 40th President of the United States, was almost strangled to death by a chimpanzee? It's true. While filming It's Bedtime for Bonzo, where Reagan played a college professor who was to raise a chimpanzee as his own child, the chimp grabbed a hold of Reagan's necktie and pulled so tight it started to cut off his airways. Once Reagan was able to break free, a crew member needed to cut the tie from his neck so he could breathe. Did you know famous horror filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock's biggest fear was law enforcement? To the point where he wouldn't even drive a car for fear of getting a parking ticket. This is because when he was 5 years old, his father handed him a note and advised him to deliver it to the local police station. When he handed the policeman the note, the policeman locked poor Alfred up in a cell and told him, "This is what we do to naughty boys." Alfred never got over the phobia. Now you know. Why do people fear Friday the 13th? For one, the number 13 is considered unlucky to begin with. And for an example of that, there were 13 people seated at the Last Supper the night before Christ's crucifixion. And some people believe that the crucifixion itself happened on a Friday. But I think primarily people fear Friday the 13th because it was the day that French King Philip IV ordered the mass arrest of the Knights Templar simply because he owed them money, and he didn't want to pay it back. Others say it was because they knew too much about the Catholic Church and the Pope pressured the king to dismantle the knights. Either way, this resulted in many of their deaths and ultimately the end of the order. Or was it? You are not going to believe this. On November 13th, 1983, police came across the dead body of Michelle Frederick. She was laying near a wrecked Corvette and Bud Light cans were scattered everywhere. The driver of the car was missing. Police later found him at home. He was naked and covered in blood. He had no memory of the night before due to a skull fracture. No charges were ever filed as his blood and urine samples were lost or accidentally destroyed. The driver was August Busch IV, the last heir to Anheuser-Busch. Did you know the electric chair was invented by a dentist named Alfred Southwick? The idea came to him after he heard the story about a man instantly dying after touching an electrical generator at Niagara Falls. Was Vigo the Carpathian in Ghostbusters a real person? Well, no. He was made up by Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd. But he was based on Vlad the Impaler, a 15th century Roman ruler who used extremely cruel methods of punishment, primarily impalement. Sources claim he murdered between 40 and 100,000 people. Vlad's last name was Dracu. As a matter of fact, he inspired the idea of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now you know, and if you want to know more, hit that subscribe button.